Hi, my wife Mary, she's 32, and recently I've started to suspect she's cheating on me. And as it turns out, I wasn't wrong. You'll be absolutely shocked when you watch this video till the end. It started a few weeks ago, on what I thought was just another normal Monday. Mary left the house early, saying she had an important meeting with her boss. She kissed me on the cheek like always and rushed out the door, looking sharper than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. Mary always took her job seriously, and being a project manager, she often had to meet clients or present reports to the upper management. But then, things started adding up. She came home late that night, claiming the meeting ran over and she'd grabbed dinner with her team. I nodded, not wanting to seem overbearing, but something about her tone felt rehearsed. She avoided eye contact and headed straight to the shower as soon as she walked in. Normally, Mary would sit with me, talk about her day, or at least unwind with a glass of wine. That night, it was like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. Then there was her phone. Mary had always been casual about it, leaving it lying around the house or forgetting it in the kitchen. But now it was glued to her hand. She would smile faintly at texts, swipe them away, and claim it was work stuff. I didn't want to pry, but it was hard not to notice how protective she'd become over something that had always been so trivial. The tipping point came one Friday. I decided to surprise her at work with lunch. Mary worked in a sleek glass office downtown, and I'd dropped by before without issue. This time when I arrived, her assistant seemed startled to see me. "Oh, Mary's in a meeting," she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I asked if I could wait, but she hesitated before saying, "Actually, she left for a meeting off-site." That wasn't unusual, except her assistant looked nervous, almost guilty. I thanked her and left, but something gnawed at me. If Mary was at an off-site meeting, why hadn't she mentioned it? She always told me when her schedule changed. Instead of going back to the office, I decided to grab coffee nearby and text her to check in. "How's your day going?" I typed. The reply came almost instantly. "Super busy. Just in the office wrapping up reports. Love you." My stomach dropped. Why would she lie? I knew for a fact she wasn't in the office. So where was she? The next week, things only got stranger. Mary started dressing up more than usual. She traded her simple blouses for fitted dresses, started wearing heels more often, and even began applying a new shade of lipstick. "I just want to feel more confident at work," she explained when I asked about the sudden change. But confidence didn't explain the way she seemed to sparkle when she looked at her phone or the way she hummed quietly to herself while getting ready in the mornings. By this point, my mind was racing with possibilities, but I needed proof. I didn't want to accuse her without being absolutely sure. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I started keeping track of her schedule. It didn't take long to find inconsistencies. Meetings that didn't exist, work dinners that ended suspiciously early, and phone calls she'd take outside claiming they were too loud to stay indoors. Every detail was a puzzle piece that didn't fit. The breaking point came one evening when Mary got a text during dinner. She glanced at her phone and her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She tried to hide it, but I caught the smile before she looked down, pretending to focus on her meal. "Who's that?" I asked casually, keeping my tone light. "Oh, just Sarah," she replied quickly, naming one of her colleagues. But her voice was higher than usual, and she immediately turned the phone face down on the table. I didn't push her that night, but I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The following week, I came home early from work, thinking I'd have time to clear my head before Mary got back. But as I parked the car, I saw her sitting in the corner booth of a cafe across the street. The man sitting across from Mary was tall, sharply dressed, and leaned in as though he was hanging on her every word. Mary's smile was radiant, the kind that used to light up her face when we were dating. I watched as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture I hadn't seen her make in years. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Who the hell was this guy? My mind raced through possibilities. A coworker, a client, maybe a friend I didn't know about. But deep down, I knew none of those answers made sense. Not with the way she was looking at him. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. It felt wrong, like I was invading her privacy, but I needed proof. Proof of what exactly? I wasn't sure yet, but something told me this wasn't just a friendly coffee. When she got home that evening, she acted like everything was normal. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing me on the cheek as she set her bag down. "Good," I replied, studying her carefully. She didn't even flinch. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of her laughing with that man played on a loop in my head. Who was he? What were they talking about? The next morning, I decided to dig deeper. While Mary was in the shower, I picked up her phone, something I'd never done before. It was locked, of course, but her passcode was one I knew by heart, our anniversary date. My hands trembled as I opened her messages. Most of the chats were with people I recognized, her friends, coworkers, family, but then I saw it. A conversation with someone named David. No last name, just David. The texts were innocuous at first glance. "Meeting at 3, she'd sent earlier that week. "Can't wait to see you," was his reply. My stomach turned. I scrolled up looking for more context. The messages got more frequent over the past month. Today was amazing. I'm still smiling. She wrote one evening after I'd gone to bed early. Me too, David had replied. You're incredible. I locked her phone and put it back on the nightstand, my heart pounding. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and dread. Every time Mary left the house, I wondered if she was really going where she said she was. Every time her phone buzzed, I wanted to grab it and see if it was him. Then, one Friday, Mary told me she was going to stay late at work. Big deadline coming up, she said, flashing me a quick smile. I waited until she left, then decided to follow her. It didn't take long to realize she wasn't headed to her office. She drove across town to a small hotel, parked, and went inside. My chest tightened as I watched her disappear through the glass doors. I waited for 30 minutes, debating what to do. Then I saw him, David. He walked in casually like he'd done this 100 times before. She wasn't alone. The man sitting across from Mary leaned in, his body language casual but intimate. They were laughing, her laugh, soft and melodic, the one I hadn't heard from her in months. My stomach tightened. I couldn't storm in there. I needed to stay calm and figure out what was going on. I waited until she got home that evening, pretending nothing was out of the ordinary. How was work? I asked casually. Exhausting, she replied, kicking off her heels. But we're making progress on the project. Hopefully this week will be smoother. Her answer sounded rehearsed. My mind flashed back to the man in the cafe, her laughter, the way she touched her hair. Over the next week, Mary's behavior became even stranger. She started spending more time at the gym, something she hadn't done in years. I need to get back in shape, she explained one morning, pulling on new workout clothes I didn't even know she'd bought. But when I offered to join her, she quickly brushed me off. You hate the gym, Alex. Don't torture yourself. She left in a hurry, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. That night, I noticed her phone buzzing constantly while she was in the shower. It wasn't her usual group chat notifications or Instagram alerts. The name on the screen caught my attention. David. Who's David? I asked casually during dinner, my tone deliberately light. She froze for a fraction of a second before smiling. Oh, he's just someone from work. He's new and full of ideas, but he doesn't quite get how things work yet. Her explanation sounded reasonable, but something about her tone was off. She spoke too quickly, her words a little too polished. I decided to test her. You should invite him over for dinner sometime. It'd be nice to meet your coworkers. Her fork clinked against her plate. Oh, he's not really the social type, she said, laughing nervously. And besides, he's just a colleague. You'd probably find him boring. That was the first time I felt certain she was hiding something. The next day, I drove by the cafe during my lunch break. I didn't see Mary, but I noticed the same man from before sitting in the corner booth. He wasn't alone this time. Another woman sat across from him, and their interaction seemed equally intimate. Who was this guy? Was he some sort of player, a coworker? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played, that this man had somehow become a part of my life without me even knowing. As the days passed, I started noticing more inconsistencies. Mary's gym trips grew longer, her work hours more erratic. She started keeping her phone on silent, claiming the constant buzzing was distracting. She even began locking the bathroom door while she was showering, a habit she'd never had before. Then came the credit card statements. One afternoon, I opened the latest bill and noticed a string of charges I didn't recognize. A fancy restaurant downtown, a boutique clothing store, a hotel bar. I waited until she got home and casually asked about the charges. Oh, those must be for work lunches, she said, waving me off. We've been taking clients out a lot recently. You know how it is. Her answers came too quickly, and she avoided meeting my eyes. Clients at the Hotel Monarch's rooftop bar, I pressed, trying to sound curious rather than accusatory. Her face tightened for just a moment before she forced a laugh. It's a nice spot. The clients love it. You should come with me sometime. I didn't buy it, but I didn't push further. I needed to be sure before confronting her. One evening, after she fell asleep, I checked her phone. The messages with David were still there, but now they'd shifted. They weren't just about work anymore. Missed seeing you today, he'd texted. Me too, she'd replied. Maybe tomorrow? My blood ran cold. I put the phone back where I found it and lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just in my head anymore. Something was happening, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. The following morning, Mary left early again. I had no real plan for the day, but my mind was spinning. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I needed to get more information, something concrete, something that would make me understand what was really going on. I decided to follow her. I knew it wasn't the best idea. I didn't want to become the kind of guy who resorted to spying, but the thought of being in the dark, of not knowing the truth, made me sick. So I grabbed my keys, slipped on my jacket, and waited for her to leave. I didn't tell her goodbye when she left. I just watched her get into her car, the engine roaring to life as she sped down the street, her face hidden behind dark sunglasses. She was acting like she had something to hide, but I wasn't sure exactly what. I followed her from a distance, careful not to get too close. She didn't go to work. Instead, she took a series of turns, heading toward a part of town I didn't recognize. My heart raced with every turn. Where was she going? She parked in front of a small building, one I hadn't seen before. There were no signs, no visible business name, just a narrow entrance with a faded awning. She got out of the car, smoothing her skirt and checking her reflection in the side mirror. I stayed in my car, watching from a safe distance. She didn't go inside right away. Instead, she checked her phone, glancing around, looking nervous, as if she were waiting for someone. My chest tightened. Was she waiting for him? David? A few moments later, a man stepped out of the building. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, and his face was partially obscured by a pair of sunglasses. They exchanged a brief, intimate glance, and then he walked up to her, pulling her into a hug. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't some innocent work meeting. I wasn't sure what was happening, but I was certain it wasn't just business. The way they touched each other, the way they stood close, it wasn't just a simple greeting. This was something else entirely. I kept my distance, watching as they entered the building together. My mind was racing. Should I confront her now? Should I follow them inside? But I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't risk making a scene. I had to wait. An hour passed. I waited in the car, my thoughts spiraling. Was she sleeping with him? Was she meeting him for these business meetings? My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. Finally, they emerged. Mary looked flushed, her makeup slightly smudged, and she was adjusting her shirt, almost as if she were straightening herself after something intimate. They said their goodbyes with a brief kiss on the cheek, and the man walked off, disappearing around the corner. Mary stood there for a moment, looking around like she was making sure no one had seen her. She quickly got into her car and drove off, but I wasn't done yet. I followed her again, my heart pounding in my chest. Where was she going now? She stopped by a gas station, went inside, and came out with a pack of gum and a bottle of water. She looked normal, like nothing had happened. She wasn't acting like she'd just spent the last hour with another man. I couldn't take it anymore. This was too much. My mind was spinning, my thoughts a tangled mess of confusion, anger, and betrayal. I followed her home, my heart racing as I parked down the street and watched her enter the house. I couldn't confront her right now. I had to think, to process everything. I was already spiraling. When I got home, she was already inside, setting her purse on the kitchen counter. She didn't notice me right away. I stood at the door, just watching her, wondering how much I had missed over the years. How long had this been going on? "Hey," she said, glancing up, her tone light, almost casual. "How was your day?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I watched her, trying to catch any hint of guilt in her face. "I'm fine," I said finally, forcing a smile, "and just, been thinking about a few things." She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I wanted to say something. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I didn't. Not yet. Said I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a beer. "Just about us," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "About what's been going on lately?" She froze for a moment. There was a flicker in her eyes, a tiny flash of fear, but it was gone before I could be sure. "What do you mean?" I looked at her carefully, watching for any sign of the truth. "I don't know. Things just feel off. You've been acting strange lately, Mary. I'm just trying to understand why." She laughed lightly, a little too brightly. "Oh, come on, it's nothing. You're just stressed. We've both been working a lot lately." I didn't buy it, not for a second. She went to change into comfortable clothes, a pair of sweatpants, and a loose t-shirt as I stood there watching her carefully. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on, something I wasn't being told. She sat down on the couch, grabbing her phone and scrolling through it. I felt a knot form in my stomach. This wasn't the same woman I married. The Mary I knew wouldn't have been so evasive, so distant. I had to know. I waited until she was absorbed in her phone, her attention completely elsewhere. Slowly, carefully, I reached for her purse on the kitchen counter. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to invade her privacy like this, but I had no choice. My hand shook slightly as I rummaged through it, finding her wallet, a few receipts, and her phone. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked it. My mind raced with possibilities. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I needed to know the truth. I opened her messages. There it was, a string of texts between her and David. More than just work, more than just business meetings. "I can't stop thinking about you," one message read. "I miss you," David had replied. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled up, my hands trembling. The messages were filled with flirtation, and they didn't stop there. "I'll make it worth your while," David wrote. "Let's meet tomorrow, just you and me." I felt the walls around me close in. This wasn't just a harmless fling. This wasn't an innocent coworker. This was a betrayal. A betrayal I couldn't ignore any longer. I stood there, frozen in place, staring at the messages on her phone. The words jumped out at me, each one like a slap to the face. My mind was racing, my pulse pounding in my ears. "I'll make it worth your while. Let's meet tomorrow, just you and me." The messages weren't just about work. They weren't about some innocent lunch meeting. They were about something much darker, something I hadn't seen coming. The reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. My hands were shaking, but I carefully placed the phone back into her purse, trying to act casual. I took a deep breath and walked back to the living room, where Mary was still sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I tried to steady myself, my thoughts in a complete whirlwind. How had I missed this? How had I not seen it coming? I sat down next to her, trying to hide the storm brewing inside me. "You know, you've been acting a little strange lately," I said, my voice low but steady. She glanced at me, her eyes a little too wide. What do you mean? I didn't want to accuse her outright, not yet. I needed to hear her say it first. I needed to see if she'd slip up, if she'd give me the truth without me having to tear it out of her. Just, I don't know, I said. You've been distant, not like yourself. You're working late, disappearing on weekends, acting funny with your phone. I don't know, Mary. It feels like you're hiding something from me. She put her phone down, her expression immediately turning defensive. I'm not hiding anything, Alex. You're just being paranoid. Work has been stressful, that's all. You know I love you, don't you? Her words were like a mantra, but something about them felt off, like she was trying too hard to convince me. I nodded, but inside, I felt the rage bubbling up. I knew she was lying. I could see it in her eyes. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the messages, the strange behavior, the way she'd been acting distant. I had always trusted Mary, but now everything was falling apart. The next morning, I decided to follow her again. This time, I wasn't going to wait. I needed to know exactly where she was going. I waited for her to leave, then slipped out of the house behind her. I kept my distance, trying to stay hidden, watching her every move. She drove to the same part of town. This time, however, she wasn't heading toward the same small building. No, she pulled into a parking lot and got out of the car. My heart skipped a beat. I was close now. I stayed in my car, keeping my distance, but I had to know. I watched as Mary walked toward a fancy hotel, looking around before entering through the revolving doors. I could barely breathe. What was she doing in a hotel? I followed her, but I didn't go in. I parked a little further away and waited, my eyes fixed on the hotel entrance. I had to be patient. 15 minutes passed, 30, and then the moment I'd been dreading happened. David walked out of the hotel. He looked calm, collected, and way too comfortable in that setting. He didn't see me, but I saw everything. The way he smirked, the way he casually walked toward his car, made everything inside me snap. This wasn't just an affair. It was something deeper, something planned. Mary had been lying to me for months, and now I had proof. I sat there for another hour, letting the gravity of what I had witnessed sink in. It wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about the fact that I had been in the dark for so long. Mary had been playing me, and I had been too blind to see it. Eventually, I drove back home. My hands were shaking, my thoughts scattered. I didn't know what to do next. The only thing I was sure of was that things would never be the same between us. Mary was home by the time I got back, and she smiled at me as if nothing had changed. She had no idea I knew the truth. So, she said, sitting down next to me, how was your day? I looked at her, trying to hide the storm raging inside me. I know what you're doing, Mary. Her eyes widened, just for a moment, and then she quickly masked it with a smile. What are you talking about? You're seeing him, aren't you? I said quietly, keeping my voice steady, despite the fury bubbling beneath the surface. Her smile faltered, and she looked away. I don't know what you mean. I didn't raise my voice, didn't scream. I just stared at her, watching as her carefully constructed facade started to crack. I saw you with him, Mary. I followed you. My voice was calm, but the words felt like daggers. You can't lie to me anymore. She swallowed hard, but she didn't speak. The silence between us stretched out, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I've been seeing him for months now, Alex. I don't know what else to say. She didn't say anything for a moment, just stared at her hands like they held the answer. It was almost as if she was waiting for me to say something else, something to make it all right. But the truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Months, huh? I repeated, my voice colder now. How long were you planning on hiding this from me? How many nights did I spend wondering why you'd become so distant, so unreachable? Her eyes flickered with a mix of guilt and something darker, something I hadn't seen in her before. She sat up straighter, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Alex, She started, but I interrupted her. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. I've seen enough. I've been patient. I've been understanding. But this was a betrayal. You lied to me, Mary. You lied and pretended everything was fine. You made me look like a fool. She bit her lip, and for the first time, I saw her truly vulnerable. Like she had no more words to spin, but it didn't last long. Fine, she finally muttered, almost under her breath. But you need to understand, it wasn't what you think. It's complicated, Alex. I laughed bitterly. Complicated? There's nothing complicated about cheating, Mary. You got yourself tangled up in a lie, and now you're scrambling to cover it up. Her expression darkened. You're making this sound worse than it is. I love you, Alex. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted something more. Something exciting. Something that made me feel alive again. Can't you understand that? She pleaded, her eyes wide, her voice softening. But I couldn't. She didn't understand that the man sitting in front of her was someone who had spent years of his life with her, trusting her with everything, and now was just a fool in her game. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up and turned away, needing some space to think. But as soon as I started walking toward the door, she jumped up. Wait! Mary cried out, rushing toward me. Where are you going? You can't just leave like this. But I didn't stop. I reached for my coat, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. I'm going to figure out what happens next, I said, my voice low but firm. But don't worry, Mary. You'll get what's coming to you. The next few days were a blur. I moved out of the bedroom and into the guest room, not wanting to even look at her. But Mary wasn't going to let me go that easily. No, she wasn't done playing her game yet. She started sending me texts, pretending to be sweet, pretending like everything was fine. I miss you, Alex. Can we talk? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's work things out. But I knew better than to buy into her lies. Then came the phone calls, the ones where she cried and begged me to reconsider. She told me she was sorry, that she had made a mistake, and that David was just a phase. A phase. I didn't fall for it. Not anymore. I told her I needed time to think, but in my head, the decision was already made. We were done. I couldn't live with this kind of betrayal, and I certainly couldn't trust her again. But Mary wasn't going to just let me go quietly. She started to act differently, trying to undermine me at every turn. One day, I came home to find she had gone through my personal things. She'd rifled through my drawers, my emails, my bank accounts. She had even deleted some of my old messages, making it look like I had been the one hiding something. When I confronted her, she acted all innocent, feigning surprise. I don't know what you're talking about, Alex. I was just helping you organize things. That's when I realized she had no intention of letting me go without a fight. She started spreading rumors at work, trying to make me look like the bad guy. He's so controlling, she told her colleagues. He never trusted me. Even when I tried to be open, I don't know what's wrong with him. She even went so far as to call my friends and family, trying to turn them against me. He's been distant. He doesn't care about me. He's just focused on his own life, his work, his stuff. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to destroy my reputation to make me look like the villain in her little drama. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had to do something. I had to turn the tables. I didn't confront her directly. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I started documenting every conversation, every lie she told. I recorded her conversations with David, caught her in a few more lies, and made sure I had proof of everything. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life. I wasn't going to let her turn everyone against me. No, if she wanted to play dirty, I'd play even dirtier. I hired a private investigator to follow her. I wanted to know everything about her affair with David, every detail. What I found out was enough to make my blood boil. Not only was Mary seeing David, but she was also using him for her own gain. She had been sleeping with him for job promotions, for perks, for everything she thought she could get from him. David wasn't just a lover. He was a stepping stone, a way for her to climb the corporate ladder. She'd manipulated him just like she'd manipulated me. The worst part? She had no remorse. Every time I confronted her with the truth, she played the victim, acting like she was the one who'd been wronged. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Mary didn't react the way I expected when I showed her the evidence. She didn't break down or apologize. No, she doubled down. She acted like she was the wronged one, like I was the one who had betrayed her. You don't understand, Alex, she snapped, pacing around the living room. You think this is about sex or some fling? It's not. I've been trapped in this life, this marriage with you. I've sacrificed so much and you've never noticed. You've never really seen me. I stared at her, trying to keep my anger in check. You think cheating on me, lying to me, using someone for your own benefit makes you a victim? She stopped pacing and turned toward me, her face flushed with frustration. You never gave me the freedom I needed. I've been stuck in this perfect little bubble you created, this image of a happy couple, when all I ever wanted was to feel alive again. I wanted more than just being Mrs. Alex Hart. Don't you get it? The audacity of her words, the complete lack of accountability, sent a wave of disgust through me. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. Do you even hear yourself, Mary? You think that's an excuse? You think I'm the problem here? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She stepped closer, as if trying to make me feel guilty. Alex, I don't want this to be the end. We can fix this. We can work through it. Her voice softened, a mix of desperation and manipulation. Please, let's just start over. It hit me then, just how calculated she was. She wasn't asking for forgiveness because she felt sorry. She was asking because she wasn't ready to lose everything. She didn't want the consequences. She wanted to keep her cushy life, her promotions, her status, her connections without facing the truth. But I wasn't backing down. I don't need you, Mary. And I sure as hell don't need your manipulations, I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked at me, her eyes now cold, calculating. You think this is over? You think you're going to walk away unscathed? You're nothing without me, Alex. You'll see that. I didn't let her words sink in. The truth was, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her tear me down any more than she already had. That night, I finally did it. I called the lawyer and confirmed everything. The divorce papers were ready to be filed. I didn't waste any more time. But it wasn't just the divorce I was after. I wasn't going to let Mary get away with ruining my life, with using me and David for her own selfish gain. I had the power now. I kept the information about her affair and her manipulations close to me, but I was already making plans. The next morning, I went to the office early. I'd had enough of the lies she had told at work about me. Enough of the fake sob stories she'd spread. I walked into my boss's office and sat down, calm but purposeful. I need to talk to you about something, I said. You okay, Alex? You look a little. Look, I cut him off, trying not to let my frustration show. You need to know about Mary, about what's really been going on. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What are you talking about? I pulled up the emails, the messages, the records from the private investigator. I showed him everything. I made sure he understood exactly what Mary had been doing behind my back, how she had been manipulating her way to the top with David's help, and how she had lied about me. He didn't say much as he read through the materials, but I saw the shock on his face, and when he finally spoke, his tone was heavy. Alex, I had no idea, but I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure this doesn't go unnoticed. We'll handle it. I walked out of his office with a sense of relief. Finally, the truth was out, but I wasn't done yet. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to make sure Mary felt the full weight of her betrayal. I contacted her friends, the ones she thought she could trust, and told them what had really been happening behind closed doors. I didn't just want her to suffer in silence. I wanted everyone to see her for the manipulative, self-serving person she had become. I reached out to the people she'd worked with, those who had been complicit in her rise to the top, and made sure they understood that this wasn't just some affair. It was a series of calculated, self-serving decisions that she had made to climb higher, no matter the cost. I even went so far as to send an anonymous tip to the company she worked for, making sure they knew about the way she used her position to manipulate David and others for her own benefit. I knew it would make her life a living hell, but at this point, I didn't care. She had destroyed everything I had, used me as a stepping stone, and treated me like a fool. Now it was my turn to make her pay. The next few days, after I exposed Mary's affair and the web of lies she'd spun around us felt like a blur, I moved forward quietly with purpose. The papers were filed, the legal separation was underway. But now I had to deal with her, head on. She didn't take it well. Of course she didn't. Mary was the queen of manipulation, and with me no longer under her control, she shifted to her final form, the victim. She tried everything she could to get back into my good graces, using guilt, sex, even pretending she was the one suffering. But it was all a game that I wasn't willing to play anymore. I was done. One night, she cornered me in the hallway as I was about to leave the house. You can't just leave me, Alex. We've built a life together. Don't you remember that? She cried, her voice cracking with feigned desperation. Her words were like poison trying to sneak into my heart. She had used our memories, our shared experiences, to manipulate me into believing that the mess we had now was something we could fix. But I wasn't that man anymore. The naive, forgiving fool who would have taken her back for the sake of us. That guy was gone. I stopped in front of her and met her gaze. You've destroyed everything, Mary, I said, my voice low and steady. Everything I trusted, everything we built, shattered because of your selfishness. No amount of I'm sorry will fix that. She flinched. She had expected me to break, to feel the guilt that she was so used to evoking. But I stood firm, my mind made up. I'm leaving you, Mary, I said. We're done. Her expression faltered, but she quickly regained composure. You think you are just going to walk away from this? You'll regret it, you know. No one's going to believe you, Alex. You'll be the one left with nothing. I wasn't scared anymore. I had already lost everything to her. My trust, my dignity, my peace of mind. The only thing I still had was the strength to walk away. I don't need to explain myself to anyone, Mary, I said, calmly, but with finality. I have the truth, and you can't manipulate people into believing your lies anymore. And with that, I turned around and walked out the door, leaving her standing there, the woman who had once been my everything, now nothing more than a shadow of the person I'd loved. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal meetings, consultations, and papers being signed. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected. Mary tried to fight it, of course. She even tried to make things easier by offering me an out if I just take a smaller share, if I just make it easier on her. But I was beyond all of that. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about her possessions or the house we shared. I just wanted to be free. It wasn't just a physical separation anymore, it was mental, emotional. I was done living in her world, where nothing was real and everything was a game. The final blow came when I found out that she had lost her job at the company. It was something I had suspected would happen, but it still felt satisfying when I found out that she'd been caught red-handed. The investigation into her manipulations, the way she had used David to climb the corporate ladder, had finally caught up with her. She was fired for unethical behavior, for using personal relationships to gain professional advantages. The fallout was swift. Her reputation, which she had so carefully crafted, unraveled in front of her. Her colleagues, the ones who had once praised her, distanced themselves. Her friends, if you could call them that, turned their backs on her as soon as the truth came out. I didn't take pleasure in it, not anymore. Watching her fall wasn't what I wanted, but it was necessary. She needed to face the consequences of her actions, and I had played my part in making sure she did.